Hi guys, this is gsmtom.com and I'm here with a handset called Philips Xenium W8510. We can also call it Philips Xenium W8510. So this one is a model with a powerful battery. As you know, Philips has found a niche on the smartphone market. They usually launch devices with very big batteries and long-lasting batteries. This model, the W8510, has been launched in the fall of last year, and it's a dual SIM device with a big battery, obviously, and the price tag is about $500 as far as I saw on eBay, at least. As I said, Philips is famous for its Xenium devices with big batteries. As far as the design goes, we're dealing here with a bit of a brick. It's a solid device, but it's also massive, heavy, and pretty well built. The thickness is 10.4 millimeters. It weighs 173 grams. It has a plastic case. It's also slightly rounded, as you can see, and it has these screws visible here in the lower part. And let's see what we got at the front. We got the obvious earpiece here, the front camera, some sensors in this area, and capacitive buttons right here below the display. Other things, let's see the back. We got the main camera here, LED flash next to it, and also the speaker at the bottom. You can actually remove this top part of the back of the device, and under the lid you'll find two SIM slots and a microSD card slot right here. The lid is easy to put back on, and we proceed to the top where we find the audio jack, micro USB port used for charging, and the on-off button that's a bit hard to find when you're looking for it and you have to feel it. At the bottom we got a microphone, and on the sides, well, we got on the right side two metallic buttons for the volume. They look nice and they feel nice. And on the left side we got this button here. You're probably wondering what it does. It's not a camera button, it's a power saving button. Once you press it, it's more of a slider than a button, so if I slide it, I have activated the power saving mode, just like that. Okay, so we also have a metal edge around the phone. You can see it shining here, and you can also see that the display is slightly lifted on top of the device's body and surrounded by this metal edge. It's a solid and beefy design, and if you have a thin phone, this one is not for you, but if you want a big phone with a big battery, this one is for you. Now on the hardware side of things, we get a quad-core processor here, a MediaTek MT6589, 1.2 GHz, and it's a Cortex A7 in case you're wondering. The GPU is a Power VR SGX 544, and the display is an IPS LCD with a diagonal of 4.7 inches and resolution of 1280 over 720 pixels, so it's a HD screen. We also have 4 GB of storage, of which you only have available about 1.7 GB, so not much space. There is also a microSD card slot offering you an extra 32 GB. The RAM is at 1 GB. The front camera is a 1.3 megapixel shooter, and the back camera 8 megapixel shooter with LED flash. On the connectivity side, we get HSDPA with 42 MB per second download, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth 4.0, Edge, and micro USB 2.0. Other specs here include the GPS, accelerometer, and proximity sensor. And as far as the battery is concerned, well, let's check this out. We tested the battery because it's actually the selling point of the device. We're dealing here with a lithium-ion unit with a capacity of 3300 mAh. On paper, it provides you with 18 hours of talk time, 10 hours of web browsing, 860 hours of standby time, or 65 hours of music. In our test that involves HD video playback with Wi-Fi on and brightness of 50%, we achieved 12 hours and 14 minutes of playback, or you can also achieve 4 hours of continuous gaming. The charging is kind of long, but it's expected, 3 hours and 15 minutes. I'm not very impressed by these 12 hours. I was actually expecting a bit better than 12 hours, because the flagship Galaxy S5 can achieve 11 hours, and so can the iPhone 5s. Usually you can get about 2 days of moderate use out of this Philips phone, or even 3. So the functioning time in playback mode, 12 hours and a bit underwhelming. There's also power saving here, activated by this button or by accessing a dedicated app. There is no feature in the settings area, you have to look that up like this. This is the power saving application. It's listed as simply power saving, and it has a special light bulb as the icon. So we have the default mode that will retain calls, SMS, disable data connection, and the customized mode that allows you to tweak your power saving experience. So you can tweak the brightness level when you start power saving, tweak the timeout, deactivate the Wi-Fi, mobile data, Bluetooth, GPS or clean running apps to save even more energy. Okay, so those were the power saving modes, and I must mention that this device also comes with a special fast charge feature. So if you're running out of juice and you really have to get to an important appointment, you plug in the charger, and with 10 minutes of charging you'll be able to talk for 2 hours, so 2 hours of calling, or it will function in standby for 20 hours. So that's the fast charge for you. Overall, it's a good battery, I would say a very good battery, but only among handsets with big batteries. If you compare it to a flagship, you'll see that it only beats the Galaxy S5 by 1 hour, and I was expecting just a little bit more. Okay, now let's move on to the audio side of things. We find the stock player here, and let's listen to some tunes. Let's try maybe this one. The speaker is right here. Okay, some conclusions. I would say that the sound is slightly muffled for some reason, the bass is okay, and the volume is so it's not very loud. You can also mess with the equalizer, which is the default one for Android devices. You can activate or deactivate it. You got settings like dance, flat, folk, heavy metal, hip hop, jazz, normal, classical, or you can customize your own experience. You got bass boost, 3D effect, and preset reverbs, and as I said, you can deactivate it. Okay, I would say that all the notes are well heard on this device, but the main problem here is the volume that could be a bit better. Now let's see the pair of headphones bundled with this device. Here we go. Those are the headphones that are bundled here. They're made of what seems to be pretty cheap plastic. They're your average headphones, and they also have a big remote here. And from what I can see, it has 2 buttons for volume, which is always a good thing. These headphones provide good bass, and they're comfy. They're pretty loud. However, if you take the volume up to the maximum level, they will distort the sound, which is not very good. You can also enhance your audio experience by going into the settings area, audio profiles, and activating this option BES audio enhancer, but only available for the earphones. We also use the Decibel Meter on this device to test its strength, and let's see what came out of that. Okay, so this is our Decibel Meter. At the back of the device, 81.9 decibels. At the front, 81.7 decibels. As you can see, not very impressive values. I've played with devices that can even reach 90 decibels, so not very impressive. We also have FM radio here. This is it. You require to insert the headphones for that. Here we go, and the features include search, speaker, record FM, and that's pretty much it. So as I said, the acoustics do not impress me, but now let's see how the screen handles the pressure. So we're dealing with a 4.7 inch 720p screen. It's an IPS LCD, and now let's find a video player to check it out. I'm going to play a test sample. So here we go. It's an IPS LCD, which means wide viewing angles, and it also means slight oversaturation, but the screen is bright and crisp. The image is crisp, so no problems here. I have to say that the brightness of this model is actually a bit better than I expected, and the image looks pretty good in spite of the obvious oversaturation caused by the IPS panel. If you go into the settings area and go to display, you'll see options like lock screen notification, scenes that refer to the usage mode of the phone. You got your default scene or your work scene, or you can create new ones if I'm not mistaken. Then we got your themes area, then wallpaper, brightness, daydream, clock size, sleep or wireless display. We also did some tests using a microscope and a lux meter, and let's see what came out. First of all, these are the pixels of the screen subjected to a microscope. They're RGB striped pixels, and as far as the brightness is concerned, we achieved a pretty impressive 396 lux units on white, and I would say this is not bad at all, considering the famous LG G3 scores 343 lux units and the Xperia Z2 from Sony scores 366, and we beat both of them as far as brightness is concerned when using a lux meter. Overall, this is a good display, and we move over to the camera. So this one is an 8 megapixel shooter with an LED flash and f2.4 aperture. Its focal length is 35 millimeters, and I'm trying to set up this castle here to demo its features, and by its I mean the handsets. The interface includes a bunch of shortcuts on the left side and the main buttons for capture on the right side. So on the left side we got the front camera shortcut, we got flash options, we also have the capture modes. Those includes a bunch of other sub-settings. We got normal, HDR, beauty, panorama, multi-angle image, which is pretty much 3D, auto scene. We also have smile capture, best shot, and finally EV bracket shot. Getting back to the other options on the left side of the screen, we have white balance with a few sub-options related to clouds or various sources of light. And following that, we also have the settings that are actually a ton of them. We got GPS location info, exposure, color effects, scene modes, white balance, image properties, and here we find sharpness, hue, saturation, brightness, contrast, then there's anti-flicker, then there's zero shutter delay, face detection, self timer, continuous shot with up to 99 shots, picture size going up to 8 megapixels, but you can also opt for lower if you want, and ISO going up to 1600. Finally, video, EIS, I'm guessing it stands for electronic image stabilization, microphone, audio mode that can be set to meeting or normal, time-lapse interval up to 10 seconds, some effects you can play with during video capture, and finally video quality. It goes up to full HD as far as I know. Okay, so those are all the options that you can find on the left side of the screen. And now on the right side we got the shutter button, the shortcut to the video capture, and this button here that triggers the effects, makes them more easily accessible. You can do up to 4x zoom. And finally, let's actually take a picture of this castle and check it out. Not the fastest picture taking in the world, but it works. As you can see, the brightness levels are pretty good and the level of detail not very bad. Okay, let's get rid of the castle for now and check out the gallery and the shots we've taken during daylight. Okay, so camera shots, we got over 100 pictures, including some with effects. We start off with this one. Pictures of flowers, statues and all that. I would say these are mid-range level pictures. There is oversaturation, there are burnt pictures, especially the flowers. It was a very sunny day and pictures got burnt in the process by the sunlight. I would say we're also taking some decent macros with this camera. An example would be here. So pretty decent close-up shots. But also some unexplainably blurry shots. We also have HDR, regular picture, HDR picture, maybe even a bit too bright for its own good. And if I'm not mistaken, this is yet another case of HDR that's too bright. Okay, so even more shots. This is the panorama. It actually looks pretty good. It's wide enough, I would say. And now let's see some other pictures. This one is a multi-angle picture, the one I mentioned before. It's sort of like a 3D shot. This is yet another example of a 3D shot. Basically about 3 pictures stitched together to create a 3D effect. And this is yet again HDR, normal and HDR. This time it's well applied, it's not exaggerated, so that's good. The images are crisp, they're bright, they're about the same level as one of those many all-view phones with 8 megapixel cameras that we've tested over the past years. As I said, burnt pictures because of the sunlight, and those are actually pretty good shots of flowers in close-ups, so at least it handles close-ups pretty well. 8 megapixel camera here. Sometimes the pictures get blurry for no reason at all, which may become bothersome for some people. I would say the focus is reasonably fast and picture taking is also reasonably fast. A lot of pictures, you can enjoy them in the full review on gsmdom.com. Now I will address your concerns about the video. So let's find the video to check out. We got this one here. And let's play it properly with the standard video player. The camera films in the 3GPP format, which I don't like at all. It does full HD videos at 30 frames per second. The videos are crisp, we got good white balance, good exposure, okay quality. The obvious loss of focus that you can see right here is trying too much to focus properly. The colors are good, quality is okay, there's poor stabilization, and aside from the focus loss, I'd say we're doing quite fine. Also, this focus loss is kind of random. In some shots the focus was excellent, in others not so much. Another video. And keep in mind that all of these pictures and videos were taken on a cloudy day, so I would say we're doing fine. If you try to zoom in, you'll notice a bit of lag, let's call it that way, or it's zooming in steps, not immediately. Okay, so overall I would say it's a good mid-range camera, but only for a mid-range, not a high-end phone. You can also edit pictures if you want. So if you pick, let's say, this one, and you press the menu button, edit, you'll see a bunch of filters, frames and things like that. So we got these filters here. The vintage one works fine. And then there are the frames, making it look like an antique picture. Then crop, straighten, rotate or mirror, and finally options like vignette, contrast, shadows, curves, hue, saturation, and more to play with. Okay, now let's discuss the performance. For that I'm going to use the gallery yet again, and I'm going to address the issues regarding the temperature. After playing with this device for a few minutes, we've achieved a temperature of 42 degrees Celsius, which means it suffers a bit from overheating, but only a bit, and that high temperature was achieved in this area at the front. The display gets a bit hot, and also this area here, it also gets hot at around 42 degrees Celsius. We also have the web browser here. It's pretty much the stock one, nothing fancy, and let's access gsmdom.com. Speaking of stock, we also have the stock keyboard. As you can see, the browser is pretty fast. Loading up our website. We have 2 nifty reviews of games, by the way, be sure to check them out. Smooth scrolling and no problem with the pinch to zoom. Okay, and now it's time to address the benchmarks. Here we go, back to the gallery yet again. It was very hard for me to pick a phone to compare this model with. We haven't exactly reviewed many mid-range phones lately, so I picked ones that I found to be similar in my mind. We got a Prestigio Multiphone 5044 Duo and the all-new A5 Quad. This phone and those two have something in common. All three of them had quad-core Cortex A7 processors. Okay, so the Xenium model from Philips gets a score of 4,763 points. We beat the Prestigio Multiphone model mentioned before, but we get beaten by the all-new A5 Quad that scores 5,900 points. Okay, so this model is between the other two. In Quadrant, meanwhile, in Antutu, we scored 13,912. We beat the Prestigio Multiphone 5044 Duo by about 700 points, while the all-new A5 Quad beat us by about 3000 points. In Nenamark 2, 44.6 frames per second, we were below the Prestigio by about 1 frame per second, and we were totally below the all-new A5 Quad with its 62 frames per second. Next up, Velamo, 1607 points. We beat the Prestigio phone by 200 points, got beaten by the all-new by about 300 points. And in Metal we got a pretty low score. And in Geekbench 3, as you notice, we haven't performed 3D Mark because it simply would not work on this device. So in Geekbench 3 we got 327 in the single core test and 1100 in the multi-core test. I should mention that the other two models did not get this test at the time they were tested. Next up, GFX bench. We have a score of 2.8 frames per second in the 1080p T-Rex off-screen test. I should probably mention that this score is lower than the one achieved by the iPad mini's GPU, just in case you want a comparison. And now the speed test, 25 mega per second in download, 21 in upload. I would say we're doing pretty fine. While SunSpider has a very poor score, it's 1437. Usually it's good to have below 1000, and by below I mean less is more in this test. Finally, browser mark, 659. The best score in this test is about 1600, so I would say we're not doing fine. So as you can see, this phone does not achieve high scores in benchmarks. However, it does function without a lag. It runs new games, it runs Asphalt 8, it runs Minion Rush and even FIFA 14, so no problems with that if you can get them to install on your card, because as I said, you only get 1.5 gig and a bit more of storage on this device, and I mean 3 gigabytes. Okay, so as far as the phone features are concerned, this is a dual SIM model with good signal, good voice quality, and also a loud earpiece that's very well highlighted here at the top. I would say that the Wi-Fi signal is pretty weak. At all times of the 4 or 3 bars available here, I only got 2, so I could never achieve maximum signal on this phone, so that's why I say that the Wi-Fi is pretty weak. On the operating system side, we have Android 4.2.2. There's no lag whatsoever, as I said. We can run Asphalt 8 and Riptide GP2, and overall it's a stock experience plus or minus the widgets. You can see them here. They're mostly stock widgets, but there's the occasional inclusion from the folks at Philips. We also have some special wallpapers from them. So as you can see, Philips wallpapers included here, bundled with the device. And now let's have a look at the apps pre-installed on this model. Okay, so there's a backup and restore feature, obviously useful. The browser, calculator and calendar, which are stock. Chrome, clock, downloads, Dropbox that I installed, task manager, there's a file manager here. So you can greatly manage your storage, gallery, Gmail, Google+, Kingsoft Office for the sake of productivity. So you can mess around with Excel files or PowerPoint files. We also have Google Maps. And the GPS works fine here, there's no lag. It found me pretty fast, indoors and outdoors, so a pretty accurate GPS. We move further, let's see what else we got here. Messaging, I installed Minion Rush and played it. Movie Studio to do some editing. Navigation and news and weather. Pretty basic app, showing you the top stories, stuff happening around you, sports, entertainment, and finally the weather. We also have the notebook that's used to take little notes of the things you want to remember and categorize them by color codes or tags like work, family, and things like that. And then we got a sound recording feature, power saving obviously, photos, play books. Here's the sound recorder. We got the game that I installed, and this is the to-do list. You can add new to-do items, you can add an expiry date. Once again, a pretty basic app. And we got the touchpad keyboard that actually pretty nice. I activated it, and now I go in the browser, and here we are. It's very comfy to use, so if I want to write phone, it has gestures, it has a lot of features that you can play with. You also have various setups, various gestures, so it's very user-friendly. Finally, to complete the list of apps, we got the wireless input device and Xenium Club. See, this is a Xenium phone where you can find games, apps, and other things like that. It just installed a new version of itself apparently, and let's see how this goes. As I said, you can find here games, apps, wallpapers, and other things like that. Now let's move over to the pros and cons section of the review. I'll start with the pros. We have a very good battery, fast charging, a good display that's pretty bright, decent camera, no lag. This device can run new games like Asphalt 8, it has a solid build, and those are the pros. Now on the con side, this phone is, let's admit it, it's thick, It's bulky, it's massive, and it has a pretty weak audio. It tends to overheat in the upper area, especially the screen area, which is not exactly good. The Wi-Fi tends to be weak in signal, and it will probably remain stuck at Android 4.2.2. I expected a bit more from the battery. 12 hours of playback is still okay, but I wanted even more from it. I would say that it's time to give it some grades. So the Philips Xenium model that I have here, the W8510, gets 8.7 out of 10 for design, a 9 for the hardware, and an 8.7 out of 10 for OS and UI. And the final grade for this Xenium phone is 8.8 out of 10 here at gsndom.com. And it's probably the best battery I've tested for the past year on a smartphone, but only the best battery for this diagonal, the sub 5-inch diagonal. I would say it's only an hour above the Galaxy S5, and that's not a huge performance. So in conclusion, 8.8 out of 10 at gsndom.com. Bye bye.